I've been asked to justify why engine balancing is necessary for Titan's Battalion several times. So I'm going to try to do this in one take. First, to engine balance a game, to give the rules of a game to an AI, have it run hundreds of tests, and be able to look at the win-loss ratio for the two different asymmetrical sides of the game, as well as having high-level example games of what the close to the best possible plays in those positions are. That's what engine balancing is. Now, doing this is significantly faster than testing with humans. An AI can play through a game at a higher level with more concrete data than humans can in less time, overall. And those human tests, if done, are not only imperfect, but take significantly longer. Most games, the balance between the sides being good enough to be fun works, and human testing is enough for that. But it takes a while to do so. Losing in those games where it isn't perfect or complex enough is player psychology. Losing becomes because the game isn't balanced, and they may choose not to approach the game again. And I'm not talking about the people that complain in an online forum. I'm talking about the ones that quietly just dismiss being invited to a tournament by their friends because of their views on the game from that bad experience. That same player, knowing the game is balanced, for example, due to symmetry, both sides having the same abilities, the same pieces, like normal chess, are more likely to instead take that same loss as a problem they need to solve and want to get better. Thus, rather than being pushed away, they become more invested and even share the game with others because they want to improve. It's now a problem, a challenge. It isn't the only factor by far on whether or not they continue to play, continue to share that game with others, and act as that word-of-mouth marketing, because each player is a customer when you're the one selling the game. But it does contribute, and this slurry of factors is what can cause the game to reach a critical mass of being shared and played. That critical mass allows the game to have the opportunity to grow properly and not fall flat on its face. You can do other things like marketing and just having an all-around solid game when someone sits down with it. But it's just not something most developers use, engine balancing, I mean, since most games can't use this method. They have to just be good enough. And the other way to achieve that game psychology, where people want to replay it and get better, is by making the game strategy deep enough that a meta can form through things like reaction time in a real-time game, like a fighting game, or player collections of things like cards or units, things that the player can improve on to make themselves stronger, that are directly shown and very obvious. And it's being shown that that matters. That's what's important. Give the game a bit of time for the community to grow normally, and the players don't know what the optimal strategy is immediately, and won't have that optimal strategy immediately depending on the other aspects. It could take years for the players to find it, and it often isn't what the developers expected. Then a balance patch or an update is released to reset that clock on how long it takes for the players to break the game. That's what most devs use. But in an asymmetrical game that is turn-based and deterministic, which are the aspects that make a chess game or chess-like game need to be more perfect from a player perspective. And that method of balancing, of making the game good enough and then complex enough and then the players find these later, has less initial momentum in these chess-based games. Chess-based games almost have to be perfect from the start or they get torn apart by its initial player base. They can lose quite a bit of momentum because the word of mouth isn't, hey, you should play this, it's fantastic. That word of mouth connects back to that player's psychology and becomes negative. Becomes something that the player downs on the game for and actually tells other people not to play because of. But the things that give chess-based games that kind of problem, where it almost has to be perfect, are the same things that make engine balancing possible. Because it's deterministic and turn-based, and you can, with enough time and theory, figure out what probably the most optimal move is in a given position, means a computer can do it. And a computer can do it faster and better than a person. Now, the second half of this. Titan's Battalion is a game that, especially in the target areas, I have very specific locations where concentrations of the type of players that would want to play this type of thing exist. I know because I am part of my own target demographic and I could just look for where people like me exist, which is Charleston, South Carolina, Austin, Texas, New York City, Kings Bay, Georgia, San Diego, California, Bremerton, and Bangor, Washington. These are specific targetable locations, especially Charleston, San Diego, Austin, and New York. These are specific locations where this game can grow. So, I have confidence that they can be the seeds for a community, and these communities can grow properly. And with that confidence, I want to point out that having it engine balanced saves us money in the long term, saves us time in the short term. Engine balancing, because it's possible, is something that needs to be done eventually so that the community takes the game more seriously. So that the community, it's a selling point. It's something that a player can latch on to and go, hey, this game did this. It's a talking point that creates a community buzz. And lastly, having the game this way will cause more word-of-mouth marketing to happen, will cause the game to have a better public response, and will cause the game to be more likely to be successful the first time. Now, I'm not saying this idea is perfect. In the case where this game fails, which is possible, I doubt it, but it is possible, that this game doesn't reach the type of audiences and overall falls on its face. If that happens, then this is an extra $3 to $5 grand that didn't need to be spent on something if it was going to fail. Now, I personally, because I know it is necessary for this game to work right, am perfectly willing to sit back, do everything I can up to that point, and build up funds through working in other ways and come back to it. But that is a starving artist strategy that keeps other people's money and other people's time, which is already invested in my business and my ability, less effective. I can easily sit down, pick up another job, and save up an extra $3 to $5 grand before putting it into this. Or I can bring in an investor of some kind in some small amount for that. Just this aspect. And if I'm trying to bring in an investor, there are other things, small things, which would also improve the likelihood of the game going over as well as it should the first time. That being more internal art for the books. Now, to that point, I'm going to bring up our competition, and I'm going to show two examples. I'm going to show two examples of the type of presentation that this game is trying to have. This is Cyberpunk, the role-playing game which inspired the video game Cyberpunk 2077. Now this is well-known, well-established, has beautiful front cover art similar in style to what Titan's Battalion has, and has well-laid out information and tables with internal full arts on the inside cover and throughout the book, more in-depth illustrations. And this is a major selling point of this type of book. Now, secondarily, Chivalry and Sorcery is a smaller time game in the same vein as the style of presentation that we're using. Has the same target audience, and therefore is using the same strategies. It's not the same type of game, by far, but this is the product in a nutshell. Chivalry and Sorcery, being that smaller time, has a lower quality cover, has fewer art pieces inside, and is more in-depth with the rules. But even Chivalry and Sorcery, as small as it is, as laid out as it is, has, and I didn't even check this beforehand, has internal art pieces of that same quality. And the reason for that is player engagement, customer engagement at the shelf. The customer picks up the book, opens it, and starts looking through it, and they're internally registering and comparing to what they expect. In a book this large, with the pretty art on the cover, and then they see well laid out general rule sets, lore, and small art pieces to make the player feel like it's not just a wall of text that they're staring at. And this style of presentation, without the game board, is what we are trying to release first. Now, the other added benefit of releasing just the book first is A, it gives us a fully fledged product that has a single use case. There isn't any extra boxing, it is just a plastic wrap on the book. And, unlike something like a narrative book, it is a more defined product than some work of fiction. It is a game, it is an experience. The player is buying it expecting a return on their time. They're expecting something enjoyable to sink their time into in a social setting. And with that comes additional products. Now this is a simple thing that I personally use in my real-life playtests. It is a dry erase board that I can put whatever shape I want onto in order to properly play my own game. Now, these dry erase tiles are something that we can pick up and market on our website as a third-party piece in order to better convey the game. Same goes for miniatures. This is actually a piece that I had commissioned in this paint style on an existing miniature as a prototype for this game. And those types of miniatures can be sold third-party or direct made from the factory by us in these sets purpose-made for this game on our own website or through online vendors such as Amazon, giving us a rough estimate about 20 additional products that we can market and sell without adding any additional marketing cost. You simply pick up the product, get the line together, and the book and all of the marketing for the book ends up acting as additional momentum and more revenue. Now, the next follow-on for that is the app, which allows more players to engage if, for example, they're stuck at home, if another pandemic happens, or if they're a college student with not enough spare time to go out to some sort of social setting. Now, this online thing, which the book automatically gets you into, essentially by buying the book, you would also be buying the game in advance, or you could just buy the game. This becomes a positive feedback loop, where the two, and any buzz built around the two, funds sales for the other, and then loops back to our other third-party or otherwise products. This is not just a single sale, it's a line of products, and we want to do it right the first time. That's why we need to do engine balancing, to lead into everything else that needs to be done after with enough momentum.